But yeah, had to deal with some sound things. No big deal. I'm gonna wait until I see it. You know me. Until I see it, it's not real. If I don't see it, it's fake. I'm about to see it. I'm about to see it. Are they gonna like? Yes, I have seen it. It is good. We are good. What's up, everybody? Again, sorry I'm a little late, but we had to deal with a sound issue today. So yeah, we knocked that out and we're here. What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Good afternoon if it's afternoon where you're at. Good evening if it's evening where you're at. Good tomorrow. How is the future? Australia, are you there? What's the future like? Do we make it another day? Did we save the climate from collapsing? I want to know everything. And good morning to all my fellow West Coasters. Good morning. This is my morning show. I know you're thinking, Ron, it's after 11. I'm a comedian. It's morning to me. I do a morning show. I've been doing a morning show for a long time. We got a fun show planned today. But first, let me thank some of the folks who make this show possible. Our friends over at ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. You can get their tea wholesale because of the pandemic. Makes a wonderful holiday gift, by the way. I like the raspberry pecan. I like the Monk's Blend. Those are two of my favorites. Go to ZT, get some tea for your loved ones, and tell them Ron sent you, right? Our friends over at triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. Trendy Name makes topical pain oil that you put on your body that I use on my neck all the time. It has done wonders for my neck. Thank you so much for the care packages. And Trendy Nate also educates the public on cannabis. And last but certainly not least, folks, as the holiday season is upon us, you know what makes a great holiday gift? A theme song. And how can someone get their own theme song? They can go to patreon.com/Ron Placone, and for a give what you can level, they get all kinds of exclusive content, including I'll make you your own theme song. That's a patron a perk that I offer. And again, I don't have any tiers on my Patreon. It's a give what you can level. So whatever level you're comfortable giving, an amount that you won't miss, that gets you a theme song for you or a loved one. So patreon.com/Ron Placone if you are interested and able. I know it's tough times. If you're on tough times, do not worry about it. But if you are on stable ground, you got a little bit you won't miss. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring in my guest today. She's a regular. She's one of my favorite people to talk to. And on a Monday, I decided it was really appropriate because we have a punk rock oriented story, and she is my fellow punk rock and philosophy nerd. Please welcome back to the show, Tina Desiree-Berg. What's up, Tina?
Hey, I am your fellow philosophy nerd.
Yes. Oh yeah, we got some fun stuff to talk about today. I want to go here first though, because I got some general stuff I want to talk to you about. But first, we'll go through some of the news of the day, and one of them is a tweet from your timeline. But first, there's this. So Andrew Yang had Ariana Picari, I hope I'm saying her name right, on his podcast recently. And Ariana Picari, we covered her essay when it first came out. She was a former MSNBC producer who left the network because of how freaking ridiculous the whole thing was. And she kind of, to an extent, blew the whistle on a number of things. I mean, she was talking about how they talked about nothing but Russia 24/7. She talked about how their election coverage was so skewed, how they clearly showed favoritism towards certain candidates over others, how they do not cover environmental issues properly. And here's something she said specifically to Andrew Yang. This is the segment they highlighted. We're going to go ahead and listen to it.
So you have these concerns that are building up over a period of time. And then you actually had to bite the bullet and say, wait a minute, am I going to keep doing this or am I going to leave? What was it that actually pushed you to action?
I was angry almost every day in those meetings. Wow. I frankly had issues with how they were covering the George Floyd stuff. The way that they covered the protest, they wanted conflict. Even if nothing was happening, they wanted it to seem like something was happening. And if there was a car that was on fire, they're going to play that video over and over again. Meanwhile, 95% of the protests were peaceful. They would monitor all of those protests. They'd have cameras and choppers, they're monitoring the protests. And unless it turned violent, they would not, quote, take it live. They wouldn't show that peaceful protest because nothing was happening, according to them. It was boring and it wouldn't make good TV. When Trump went to Tulsa, there were opportunities to talk about some of the kind of painful history in this country, it would have been very easy to discuss the history in Tulsa and the Tulsa riots or Juneteenth and what is what is behind that and why it's so meaningful to the African American community. And you can trace the anger from those events to George Floyd. It would have been it wouldn't have taken very long at all. But there was a history there that I didn't know, and I know a lot of smart people and journalists didn't know, and it was a perfect opportunity to share that, and it helps the nation understand what is happening other than just people are angry and looting the local Walmarts.
There is something fundamental about two different purposes. One would be I'm going to edify and inform, and so I'm going to serve you some stuff that might be not that scintillating. And then there's this other direction that it's like I'm entertainment. Like I'm going to have a certain pattern and rhythm and characters and something that you can cheer or boo.
So that was interesting. And well, it's nothing that we don't already know in many ways. I mean, we know how the media covers protests. There's been media theorists that have covered this for years, going back to the 60s. But it's very telling to hear it firsthand from somebody who just couldn't take it at MSNBC anymore and had to get out of there. And hey, look, I have some political differences with Andrew Yang. I certainly don't agree with him on everything. We even have a little bit of a Twitter history. But, I respect the movement that he's built. I respect the fact that he has turned a lot of people onto politics for the first time. I respect, and some of his ideas I like. I mean, there's some ideas he has that I think are actually great ideas. He was the only 2020 contender that I know of that was actually calling for a national journalism fund, which I think is an amazing idea. Right. He was the only guy talking about it. And he had a lot of other interesting ideas kind of like that. And because of the whole freedom dividend thing, none of his other ideas were talked about. Like they kind of were like, they gave him as little talking time as possible. And they were like, you're the UBI guy. And that's all we want to talk about. And some of that, I feel like he didn't always make the best use of the time he had, so some of that's on him too, a little bit, but I think a lot of it was, you're the UBI guy. We don't want you to ever be anything more than that. And we're going to make sure you talk as little as possible. And she goes on, to tell him he was on the list of people she could not interview. This woman, when she was at MSNBC, she couldn't interview Andrew Yang. If I had to take a guess on who else was on that list, I would say probably Marianne Williamson, probably Tulsi Gabbard, probably to an extent Bernie Sanders. I mean, at that point, Bernie was so big, they couldn't just ignore him. They would if they could, because they did in 2016. Yeah, but come 2020, right. Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't remember, that was Ed Schultz said he wanted to cover Bernie Sanders, and they told him he could not. What was it like for you, Tina, hearing that about the protests? First of all, for anyone who may not, be familiar with you right away, give someone a quick refresher here on what you've been doing with protests this entire year, and and then also like what was your response hearing her say that?
I think what she said is really spot on, and I think I would even go back further than the Juneteenth. I'd go back to that first initial day on May 30th, because that was really when the George Floyd first initial massive protest occurred, where there was a lot of police violence, right? And I remember that day, I was, as you know, I was here in Los Angeles at the Fairfax district, which is where all the police violence had broken out. They had snipers on the roofs with assault weapons. They had hit multiple people with rubber bullets in the heads, broken noses. It was a very violent day. But when I got home that night, and I remember being there, and the only other reporter, as I've told you, there was from The Guardian. I know on the other side of the police line, there were some independent journalists over there. I know Convo Couch was over there, some others. But where I was, it was me, my camera guy, and somebody from The Guardian. That was it. And I got home that night, and I was so dismayed when I turned on some of the mainstream news media, because absolutely nobody was talking about what had happened at that point. It was all about the looters, right? The entire situation was looters. And it kind of angered me, because most of the people saying this were in helicopters above us. They weren't on the ground. They didn't really have any firsthand knowledge about what was happening. Of course, later then the story turned into the aggressions that were occurring against other press members because they assaulted some NBC guys, they assaulted some CNN guys in other cities. So then that became a topic of discussion, which is kind of crazy that it had to reach that level for that to be discussed. But that was pretty much it. But then nothing changed. This continued to be the course. So I've been pretty much out 2-3 nights a week at protests, covering these things. And there's been very little mainstream media coverage of these protests that are ongoing. We had the Black Unity encampment in front of City Hall in downtown Los Angeles. There was, they were there for several weeks before they were broken up. They were there every night. Again, hardly any media coverage of that. So I think what she's saying is pretty on par. And I think the threat is that this time around, it's not going to stop because there's a lot of solidarity that we have that we're seeing. It's not just BLM folks. It's also Antifa. It's also the white leftists that are fighting for, changing the income inequality situation. All of these groups are, for the first time, I think, since the 60s, banding together and trying to fight the system that they see as entirely corrupted and broken, even if they have different priorities from each other. They do have all of that interceding connections, the solidarity. So I think the plutonymy is very threatened by that. And as we know, part of the plutonymy is the media and how the media paints what's going on. So if they're constantly saying it's violent protesters, Antifa's violence, looters, they're just criminals and they're stealing from stores, if they can keep that narrative up, it sort of takes away the impact of what's really going on. And I have to say, without equivocation, I have been sort of embedded, for lack of a better word, with a lot of these Antifa guys, and I trust them implicitly. They've had my back on more than one occasion. They're not this group that the media paints them out to be, And I think most of the time when they're at the BLM protests, they're there upon invitation, and they take the lead from what BLM is doing. So if they don't want any violence, they're not violence. If they say it's okay to, spray paint ACAB, they do it, But to me, spray painting ACAB is that the big crime here? I think it's better for our society to really look at where that's coming from. This isn't coming out of left field. Nowhere. There's a cohesive anger out there that is grounded in some very real things, and the mainstream media is ignoring it. So it's interesting to hear. I have not heard that clip before, so that was interesting to hear her say that to Andrew. And
well, I think that
during also the debates, they didn't give Andrew any speaking time whatsoever.
It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. Yeah, and I'm going to listen to that whole podcast because when you look at the history of both of those human beings, where it's like, and I covered her essay on this show when it came out, but I look forward to listening to that whole podcast and just how they dive into it. And also I want to refresh everyone's memory who may not know. I mean, you got your windshield broken by cops. You took some tear gas for sure.
Hang on, Ron. They're saying they have a hard time hearing. You can't hear? Talk to us, people.
They can't hear us?
I don't know. Somebody just.
I think maybe for some people the video might have been low. I think that might be what they mean. Oh, someone's saying they're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hang on. She's all quite. Oh, hang on.
Other people are saying the volume is fine.
Is that better? No, volume is fine. Oh, I guess. Okay, so it's not. Sorry. Thank you, James.
I think you're good.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
But you do sound louder.
We were having some audio issues a little bit earlier, so
we had audio issues earlier. That is true. But I think you're good. Okay. I mean, you sound louder in my headphones. So yeah, people are saying better. All right. Okay. So I think we're fixed. I think we're good.
Oh, it says better. Okay.
So let's go to something you tweeted then. Can we talk about that next? I just saw this breaking. Biden's DNI pick, Avril Haines, is not someone, which I think it was either going to be her or Avril Lavigne. He definitely wanted an Avril. And I think the last minute
Lavigne would be a massive improvement. Let's be honest.
I think I'd be fine with that. Yeah, I think Avril Lavigne. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of her music, but I think she'd be pretty fair. She would just be She'd just be like, let me just have my binder full of skater boys and I'm happy. It's like, all right, you can have that. That's fine. That's fine. But
that is so Gen X of you.
Right? Biden's DNI pick, Avril Haines, is not someone to trust. This is your tweet, Tina. Palantir has a sordid Fourth Amendment history and created ICE software. Controversial data mining firm Palantir vanishes from Biden's advisor's biography after she joins campaign. Okay, so what's going on there, Tina?
There's so many levels to this onion. Where do I begin? So if folks aren't familiar with Palantir, they need to be. This is you know what? I rarely use the word evil. I'm going to use evil here. They are a very evil corporation. They are pretty much responsible for creating the massive surveillance state that we live in. So not only did they create the ICE detention software that they use to track immigrants, a lot of the police departments use the Palantir software. Peter Thiel, who is their founder, he is a billionaire guy that is a huge Trump supporter. There's a long history of Fourth Amendment rights violations with Peter Thiel and Palantir. And the fact that they removed that from her bio is very telling, I think, because a lot of people would see that as a red flag. And I also think that the fact that you're coupling that with the CIA connection. So she ran the CIA under Obama. This is not somebody we want in this position, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, when you look at, especially a lot of the stuff that ICE has done, and when you look at, I was on a campaign to ban facial recognition software, which fortunately has seen some success. There has been some banning of facial recognition software. But when you look at the way police and ICE have straight up just abused this, and the fact that it has mismatches up to 98% of the time. And who does it mismatch more than anyone else? Minorities and people of color. Black people, people of color, like it doesn't mismatch white people near as often. So you hear these stories where people are getting deported to countries they've never even been to. They sent some guy to, I think it was Iran. They sent some guy there. He had never even been there, but he was mismatched. And so they sent him off there. They use it to find information on exes. They use it. I mean, it is just this is like George Orwell personified. Then you have Amazon Ring that has deals with law enforcement that we don't know what those deals are. So now it's like, it's not just George Orwell going on now, Tina. It's Aldous Huxley too, where people are allowing, like they're doing it themselves. They have a ring cam. And they're like, oh, I need this all of a sudden. I haven't needed this for years in my neighborhood. I need it now. And we have these contracts with law enforcement. No one knows what's in them. Law enforcement won't tell you what's in them. Amazon won't tell you what's in them. And they're surveilling entire neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they use FISA courts for their warrants, so we don't know what they say. You're right.
This is
also Palantir has pharmaceutical companies and other corporations as clients. So it's not just the government. And I think the other connection that really bothers me is Peter Thiel has given money to Numbers USA. Again, if you're not familiar with who they are, they're one of the John Tanton organizations. Why that's important. John Tanton was a white nativist. So not only was he against ending illegal immigration, he's against all immigration, legal or otherwise. And he also would like to deport brown and black people. He thinks the United States should be a white nation. And he, I wrote an article on him a couple years back, but he's been associated with all kinds of white supremacists. So the fact that Peter Thiel gave Numbers USA $1 million, I think is also very telling about where he comes from. The connection with ICE,
Like, is this a parody of itself at this point? I feel like pretty much every single pick Joe Biden has, it's just like, find somebody who's on the wrong side, really hardcore, and we got a gig for them. We have a job for them. Like if he was hiring somebody to be in charge of nautical navigation, he would hire frickin' Gilligan. Like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
To be fair, Gilligan might be an improvement. So he's putting in places, whether they're lobbyists or what have you, these folks are definitely not progressive. They're not in line with the leftist agenda whatsoever.
They're not even just not progressive. It's even worse than that. They're the opposite of what they're supposed to do. It's the same thing Republicans do, where it's like, oh, here's somebody, we're going to write a healthcare bill that takes healthcare away from millions of people. We're going to write an anti-healthcare bill. Now it's like, we're going to put somebody in charge of this who hates it. We're going to put Betsy DeVos in charge of education. She hates education. She hates people learning. We have this weird stigma in the United States where you can either solve problems by A, doing nothing, or B, doing something terrible.
Right.
And then you want to condition the people like, oh, you don't like this terrible thing? You shouldn't have been bitching about nothing.
Yeah. I know. We're in a very dark place, and it's both parties. I just,
Big time.
It is both. And I see people saying, why are you pushing Biden already? I'm like, look, I never stopped pushing Biden because everybody that he has appointed thus far is pretty much on par with what I expected. None of this is out of the ordinary or out of the blue. And I think as the left needs to come to terms with this, is he marginally better than Trump? Yeah, I will grant that. Is he the person that's going to make much needed change? He's not. And the reason that concerns most of us is because what comes after Trump is going to be somebody as equally fascist or more fascist, but far more competent. If we don't address the income inequality, and if we don't address racial injustice, environmental justice, the things that need to be really taken care of, you're going to end up with a more angry population that's going to demand somebody else. And if it doesn't take the route that we want, the left exit, right? Somebody like a Bernie Sanders, it will take the more competent fascist route.
That's the thing.
Opinion, at least.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that the most important lesson here is that the cycle's not broken. Yeah, a neo-fascist is going away. Okay, but what replaces that neo-fascist? A neocon. And yes, Joe Biden is a neocon. Joe Biden is a neocon. That's exactly what he is. And what does a neocon lead to? A neo-fascist. That's how it works. So the cycle's not broken at all.
Your term, it leads to the hologram of Mussolini.
Right. Yeah. It's a fun joke, whatever, but you really appreciate that joke, and that makes me feel so good.
It's why that joke works, Ron, is because not only is it true, like it gets worse than Trump, it gets to Mussolini level. It's true also in the sense that Cult 45, the folks that surround Trump, they really are cultish, and I could absolutely see them worshiping a hologram of Mussolini. I can see it.
From now on, when I'm making my set list, whenever that one's in there, it's going to be just written as Tina's joke. That's how I'm going to remember it. I'm going to be like, that's the joke that Tina likes. Tina really likes that one.
It's so true, though. So I've been going to the Beverly Hills, there's been protests or, I don't know, rallies, I guess, for Trump. I've seen some of the wackiest shit there. A couple of weeks ago, people aren't even going to believe this, but this actually happened. There was a guy there wearing this like silver space suit, and he was selling homemade Botox, which is like homemade botulism. So basically this guy is brewing botulism in his basement, and he was selling it at the Trump rally to his fellow Trump supporters.
And then Tina, you handled all of your holiday shopping in one stop. Let's look on the bright side here.
What could possibly go wrong here? Like what? I'm still like
homemade Botox. That's brilliant.
I swear to God, Ron, I could not make this up. And he had this silver spacesuit on. I don't understand what that was about. Maybe he thought it made him look like a doctor or mad scientist or something. I don't know. It was wild.
I don't know. Or maybe he was just incognito and he's like, I'm going to be able to sell to these people. Was there anything indicating his Trumpism, or was he just like, this is a buyer's market, I'm doing this?
No, he was definitely a Trump supporter.
He was definitely a Trumper? Okay.
Yeah, he was definitely a Trumper. And I was just watching this with just shock because botulism is very deadly. You could die from botulism poisoning. And people were letting him shoot the stuff into their face. I was like...
Oh, wow. Oh, like he was actually shooting it into people's faces.
Yeah.
Did you capture any of this on camera? Oh, you have it on video. Oh, nice.
I do. Yeah, definitely.
Have you dropped it yet? Because people are going to want to see that. Where can they go? You'll be able to plug everything at the end, but just where can people see that?
So anyway, I see this stuff and I think to myself, these folks are not They're part of a cult. I don't know what else to. It's like the Bernie Sanders cult doesn't exist. This is the actual cult right here. These folks, they don't have any. They just worship Trump without question.
The Bernie Sanders cult is a really shitty cult because they don't do what their supposed leader tells them. They don't do what they don't do what Bernie tells them. They're like, you guys are a cult. We're such a do what Bernie tells you, you cult. Like, oh, we're not doing what Bernie tells us to do. That's really interesting. Maybe you guys are a cult. Maybe the Trumpers are a cult. And let's be fair here, the Democratic establishment, also a freaking cult. You cannot say anything bad about our leaders who are offering us nothing. It's all about personality. Whenever you talk to like a Democratic establishment stooge, and I'm not talking about all the people who realize like, hey, they've twisted our arm into like a rock meets hard place and want a better solution. I'm not talking about those folks. That's most of the fucking country. I'm talking about the loyalists who feel like, oh, no, everything's fine if we just have someone with a D next to their name in charge. Everything's totally fine, and this system does not need a complete overhaul. It's only personality with those people. That's all they can lean on. Because it's like, what do they offer? How about all the not healthcare they're offering? How about all the not environmental solutions they're offering? How about all the not living wages they're offering? They're offering you nothing.
I agree. It is, and you're right. You can't criticize anytime you bring up a bad vote or a bad position or anything wrong. They completely flip out, which is a problem. The fact that they're not willing to take an internal look at the mechanisms inside the party that are causing problems, it doesn't bode well for us because they're still trying to serve two masters, the two masters being the working class that they pretend to represent and the lobbyists, the corporatists, the managerial classes that they actually only listen to. And the fact that we have all these appointees that Biden has placed into these positions, they're lobbyists, most of them. It's right on par with that. So it tells me they haven't learned anything and they're not listening. It's like remarkable.
Well, it's not that they don't want to learn anything. It's not, I mean, they know, they just choose because they're not concerned with winning. Like their first priority is not winning. That's just abundantly clear. So that's how they behave. And we're supposed to just say, thank you, sir or madam, may I have another. That's what they want us to do. They want us to be, well, if you don't accept our nothing, you're going to get shitty. Because that's what we do. We take a bad situation and we either just let it go or we make it worse. And if you want better than that, well, tough shit. And here we are holding aid from you during a pandemic, which, by the way, again, and I've been saying this, I'm going to say it again. It is not a, quote, handout or being fed, quote unquote, to quote Nancy Pelosi, when you get assistance during a pandemic. It's fulfilling an agreement. We pay taxes every year. One of the things that we're told, it's all a bunch of bullshit, but one of the things we're told those taxes are for, on the list of shit it's for, if ever there is a once-in-a-century pandemic, the government has your back. So when they've taken all these funds and given them to Wall Street, well, giving us a one-time fuck you $1,200 payment, it's worse than just the government not looking out for its people. It's worse than that. They are stealing from you. It is theft. They are stealing from you. Your government is stealing from you. Every day we wake up and there's not a universal, I was going to say universal UBI. That was unnecessary. Extra word there. But a UBI, an emergency UBI, they're stealing. They're stealing.
I agree. It would be if they wanted, here's the funny thing. If they really wanted to save capitalism, that would be how you saved it, because handing money to the consumer is the only thing they can do at this point to stop this collapse that's coming in January. Also, I wanted to bring up and see what your thoughts on this, Ron, speaking of Cult 45. One of the most interesting metrics that came out of the exit polling was the fact that Trump actually increased votes from African Americans by, I think it was 4%. And also the Hispanics. So what's going on there? This should scare the shit out of the DNC, in my opinion. These are the folks that they want to placate. They call their firewall, which incidentally I think is incredibly racist. If you call somebody your firewall and you offer them no policy in exchange for a vote, that's pretty shitty. But having said that, they should find those metrics to be very alarming.
But
what are your thoughts?
They don't, because as long as the whole system, and it's Democrats and Republicans, the whole duopoly, just exists to serve the 1%. And in doing that, as long as the Democrats can pull off victories when it's inevitable for them not to, that's okay. If they constantly lost and never won, then people would be like, what the hell? But as long as they win just enough that like the facade continues, that's good enough. And this pandemic, what it really does, it proved to be the exception. Because here's a general rule of thumb that has been proven correct for both of our lifetimes. You can't beat something with nothing. You can't beat Trump with I'm not Trump. Every rule, though, has its exception. What's an exception to that rule? A fucking pandemic. If you have a pandemic where it is completely mishandled every way, shape, and form, where Donald Trump, as we talked about on your show with Jen, if Donald Trump can shoot himself in the dick hard enough that he can beat himself, and he did it, Tina, he did it. He shot himself in the dick. He shot himself in the dick so hard it went out his own asshole and into Rudy Giuliani's dumb face, and then Rudy Giuliani started sweating shit, and Donald Trump beat himself. That's what fucking happened. That's why Rudy Giuliani. Did you see
the video of Rudy Giuliani going after Jen, by the way? It's absolutely
Of course
hilarious.
I did. Of course I did. Absolutely. But now is
still
Jen
laughing over that.
Why? I don't know if we can talk about this on air, but how's Jen doing? Is she okay?
Well,
I mean, she's tweeted about this, so it's not. She's tweeted.
I think she's going to need to take a COVID test. Let's put it that way.
Well, definitely, that's without a doubt. So for anyone,
had it, so he wasn't wearing a mask. As she was telling me, the room was very small, very enclosed. There was no ventilation. Really, I mean, that's so irresponsible. They endangered every press person in that room, and they don't give a shit.
Well, let's tell people what we mean real quick, just in case they're not. So Jen Dies from Status Quo was in a press conference Rudy Giuliani was giving. She asked him a very easy, basic question. He could not answer it, and he flipped out, and he called her, what was it he called her, like rude or something?
Fake. Well, the part that killed me, it went on for a little bit, but he
was like, disingenuous?
I think he pulled a Karen and wanted to speak to the manager, so Jen was like, I'm the manager.
I am the manager, and then she dunked the microphone. But no, so Jen was at this press conference, and then a relative of Rudy Giuliani's had COVID inside this press conference. And by the way, they didn't bother notifying anyone about this. They just found out via the press, basically. Is that all correct?
And I'm pretty sure he probably was already suspicious that he was sick, but just didn't care. Very scary stuff. But having said that, so I think that's one of the more important things to look at. And also, I'd say the secondary thing is the fact that they lost a lot of the House or the Senate seats in the state level. So assembly seats, state Senate seats. Why does this matter? Well, this matters for a really good reason. We're getting ready to re-gerrymander our congressional districts again.
Right.
And having more of those state seats in control of Republicans does not bode well for the future of the congressional districts. That's just a fact of the matter. This is entirely on the DNC. It was a problem in 2010. They've had 10 years to get their act together on this.
They don't
10
care.
years, Ron, and they have not done shit. And
who just got reelected speaker? Who just after losing seats in 2020, where the Republicans completely mishandled the pandemic, who still lost seats, and then they reelected the person speaker. I mean, I
don't get it.
It's not
as much as I'd like to see Nancy Pelosi replaced in her district. It's just so difficult because this is the thing that folks need to understand, especially if you're not from California. Her district is incredibly wealthy. The median income in her district, I think, is $140K a year. So this is a district.
I would expect it to be even higher. Yeah. I mean, it's San Francisco. They've really kicked the creative class out of that city. And yeah, I mean, we had Shahid Buttar on like shortly after the election to kind of just break it down, like what it was like, what he went through. And yeah, I mean, political juggernauts like that, they're just, and she's saying, it's interesting. She's saying now she's going to step down from the position in 2022. Why do you think that is? It's because she knows chances are 22 will be a bloodbath for the Democrats. It will be a bloodbath.
I agree.
I mean, you have an unpopular president. Biden will be an unpopular president. He already is. He's going to accomplish very little, if anything. He'll probably only do bad things. And then in the midterms, they're going to go against a grossly unpopular White House. It will be a bloodbath in 2022 for the Democrats.
I agree. And I think the thing that we need to keep an eye on, especially when they start the redistricting situation, is, we've now have candidates that are being run by the fascist alt-right folks. So you have that gal, the QAnon even. Like, are you kidding me? She won her election. Laura Loomer's another. So we now see these folks running for these offices. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to see more of those folks win.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't see, like, for instance, like getting back to Georgia, I'd be surprised if John Ossoff won.
Right.
I mean, I'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'd be surprised. I mean, the biggest viral clip of him is where he's saying he doesn't support Medicare for all or a Green New Deal. It's, I mean, that was his viral clip, which I watched that and I'm like, well, when he loses, I can't wait to hear how it's Susan Sarandon's fault. I look forward to it.
They're so insular, Ron. They don't even hear or see the problem with them saying this. Look, Medicare for all is incredibly popular policy, and not just with registered Democrats. A plurality
Across
of
the aisle.
voters want this.
Yeah. So,
you know who doesn't? The plutonomy, the insurance industry, the healthcare industry, and all of those folks that are lobbyists that Biden appoints and Trump appoints, both parties, right? They're the ones that don't want Medicare for all. The majority of the population does. And there's no reason why we can't have it.
Tina, I want to go here. Speaking of folks that do have their thumb on the pulse of the working class, that are connected with regular American folks, the Obamas are producing a Netflix sketch comedy series.
Oh, no.
Yes, you didn't hear about this yet? I heard about this. All right. So the Obamas, they do have a Netflix deal. We've known that. They're producing a Netflix sketch comedy series based on a book detailing Trump transition chaos. So here's the thing. Barack and Michelle Obama will produce a Netflix sketch comedy series, The G Word, expected to be loosely based on an anti-Trump book that portrays the chaos that erupted after Trump won in 2016. Comedian Adam Conover, he does that show, Adam Ruins Everything. He's going to be a partner for the series. And this is happening. This is... we don't have a difference between show business and politics anymore. And Nina, we're in Hollywood, so we experience this firsthand, or Hollywood adjacent, rather. But so we experience this firsthand, and it's still going on. I mean, there are agencies. Pete Buttigieg is signed to an agency. Joe Biden is signed to an agency. Like, they are literally married with Hollywood. And this has been going on for a long time. And now the Obamas are making a sketch comedy series, which by the way, you want to make a sketch comedy series about Trump, that's fine. I mean, that's going to happen.
Yeah,
Trump was president.
But
the Obamas, well, that's the thing. The Obamas, I mean, it's like you're picking a plutocrat here. The whole purpose of comedy is you're supposed to critique the powerful. Obama's part of the powerful, and he wasn't a great president. And this is why so much of the general populace will never realize that, because he's now enshrined in pop culture. And this is like...
My puppy just ran in here.
Because your puppy's concerned about this. Your puppy realizes the cyclical effects of something like this and the damage it's doing to discourse.
Hang on. Okay. Hold that thought.
Get the puppy a treat.
Leave the puppy in?
Oh, they can stay in. I mean, I'm all about.
Okay.
I'm a pro. This is a very pro pet show.
So, everybody,
Lucy's asleep on the
Hypatia.
couch. Hi, Hypatia. Well, I know you, Hypatia. We know each other. We're buddies. We've met.
She's 6 months old and she's giant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to tell, like, on camera versus in person, but I feel like she's gotten bigger since the last time I saw her.
She has. So she's now like 67 pounds.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she's still sweet as cherry pie, but she's big.
So, are you going to watch this series the day it comes out, or are you going to wait one day and then binge the entire thing? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 100.
Ron, I will only watch the series if you and I can do a parody of their sketch parody.
I feel like that's got to happen. I mean, just in general. Yeah, I don't know. This is just one of those things where it's just so philosophically wrong. And this goes into the whole, where we live in Southern California, people are kind of freaking out because they're worried like the industry as we know it is going away, which in many ways it is. My the optimist in me, which kind of creeps out on occasion. I don't know how frequently. I would say that my wife would say less often. I might say more, but it creeps out on occasion, the optimist in me. And the optimist in me says to the person who's like, well, the industry as we know it's going away. The optimist in me says, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The fact that we have members of the plutocracy in the political realm and otherwise that have infiltrated Hollywood, and that started in the late 70s, and it's just been escalated, and now it's on freaking steroids to where there is no difference. The fact that we live in a cycle of let's just pump money into these Marvel blockbusters that are too big to fail, and everything else is just an afterthought. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy those blockbusters. They're fun to watch, but I'm saying you don't need an industry to revolve around it. You can have something that has a little bit more to say. There are more important things to say right now. If instead of having that, we instead had something where there was an industry that had to learn how to do more with less, that had to learn how to do more as far as the audiences you're trying to reach, that kind of sees a renaissance the way we saw in the 60s, where you see anti-capitalist theaters come up here and in the Lower East Side out in New York and stuff like that. That's not a bad thing. In fact, I would argue that freaking needs to happen for the good of society. And this is why it needs to happen. It needs to happen because the Obamas are producing a sketch comedy series. The Obamas are producing a sketch comedy series.
You know, there's so much that's wrong now in our industry or in the film industry and journalism both, right? So we have a lot of the same unions. I don't know if people realize this. I think you don't have to look any further than what's gone on with SAG-AFTRA over the last 10 years. You know, the Netflix contracts. I don't know if people know this. These new media contracts.
Is that your dog going nuts, by the way?
Talent minimum wage. What do you need a union for if that's the best the union can do for you? And when AFTRA and SAG merged together, one of the things that disappeared, and I absolutely voted no on this, conversation for a different day. But one of the things that disappeared is we used to be able to make $5K a year in working in money, like whether it was residual payments or paychecks, whatever, we didn't pay worker dues on, right? So your first $5K was free of dues. Now from penny one, they're taking out dues, including residual payments. And your average working, and just so folks know that it's not just actors, it's also broadcasters, dancers that are in this union. So it's not strictly actors. But point being is that this income inequality that we've seen in the rest of the country, we've definitely seen in this industry as well. And when you see the Obamas producing sketch comedy, I guarantee they're not using this minimum wage contract. They're getting paid a lot of money, right? So they're going to turn around though, and if it was a Ron Placon show, right? They'd say like, no, we're going to sign this SAG agreement. You're going to get paid minimum wage. Like, how does any of this make sense? And I also want to point out for those that haven't been paying attention, just within the last 2 months, SAG leadership has now taken away health plan from a lot of actors. Yep. So they've disqualified people that were on the health plan have been basically booted off. So again, what's going on here? Because I'm a pro-union person, 100% pro-union, but I'm not okay with what's going on inside my own union. And I know that this is isolated, right? So this is the reaches of the plutocracy getting into everything, including our unions. I don't know how we fix this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the fix is there's going to be a complete, I mean, maybe not complete, but like there's going to be to an extent a restart on the entertainment business. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be a bad thing. It could end up making things even worse. I don't have a crystal ball, but it really doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a good thing.
I think it could be a good thing. Like, for example, Ed Asner has told me a few years back that he actually thinks that they should start a union over. Like, it's just, he was also against the merger. A lot of this stuff came from a bad merger agreement. And a lot of the, I don't know, I digress into something that I don't know if this is interesting for some folks, but I think the political issues are very real inside the entertainment guilds because the entertainment guilds are very much supportive of neoliberal policy when they shouldn't be. It's not good for their union members' rights. There is definitely a tension here.
Well, look what ended up happening. I mean, people ended up losing their health care. And yeah, Hollywood's been very neoliberal for a long time. And I mean, looking at it big picture, the emperor is supposed to be told he has no clothes. not making the content for you to consume. And we have the emperor telling you what's funny now. The emperor is telling you what's what.
And in fact, to add injury to insult, the guild president was one of the opening speakers during the DNC convention at the KDM opening segment. And she was talking about access to healthcare insurance. That was part of the speech that she gave. As she is kicking people off, as she's kicking guild members off their insurance, she has the audacity to get up there and talk about access. And I was just like, I couldn't say anything, but I was so angry at that. Just say, Hypatia's mad too.
Hypatia gets it. Hypatia's like, yeah, this is not.
Like,
this is not. This is a dangerous step for society, really.
No, it is very bad. I mean, these are folks that have paid into the system. I mean, the pension plan, like there's so many things that are wrong here that aren't getting addressed. And it's because of neoliberalism. That's really what's at root here. These folks live in their ivory tower bubbles and they don't seem to understand the pain that most Americans are feeling. It's like, it's like the Saul Alinsky thing, the 20%, top 20%, right? The 1% are hogging all of the wealth. There's no two ways about it. But they're being supported by the ones right beneath them because they buy into the system and they think that one day they're going to be part of that 1% when they're never going to be. So they're fucking everybody below them over. Am I allowed to cuss, by the way?
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay.
It's actually encouraged.
This is a real thing, right?
It's a real thing. And folks, in closing, make sure you check out Obama's sketch series. It's going to be spectacular. And coming out a few months later, you can see Pete Buttigieg's stand-up special recorded live from the finest wine cave. It's going to be killer. It's recorded at a wine cave in Iowa, by the way. The audience loved it. All right. So, Tina, I got a fun one for us. You ready for this one?
Yeah.
So, you a Sex Pistols fan?
Well, what?
Are you a Sex Pistols fan?
Oh, yeah, the Johnny... I saw this morning. The timing was just impeccable.
It wasn't it? So actually, and by the way, we did a segment on Johnny Lydon on this show when we were just talking about how he's a Trumper, and I mentioned that I'm not a very big Sex Pistols fan. Like I'm just not. I'm not a big Pistols guy. And people are like, Ron, it's just because his political views are different. You're saying, and I'm like, no, I never like. And just to prove, look at my mug today. This is a Ramones mug. And some of the Ramones are Republicans, okay? So just so you know, I like the Ramones music. I'm not afraid to have a Ramones mug. So just so you know, I don't automatically write somebody off if they have different political views to me. No, if they take it
for the Ramones and the Sex Pistols too.
Right. So, now if they take it to a very ugly place, that's a different story. There are certain lines, but I still like the Ramones, even though we probably, if we sat down and talked about politics, we would disagree a lot. I still like the Misfits. If Glenn Danzig and I ever talked politics, I know for a fact we would disagree on a lot because I've seen him on Fox News before and what he's had to say there. So, whatever. I just happen to not be a Sex Pistols fan. But check it out. Sex Pistols star John Lydon bitten by flea on his penis after befriending squirrels. This is a real thing. Sex Pistols star John Lydon, also known as Johnny Rotten, has revealed he was bitten on his penis by a flea. So he was trying to feed squirrels at his Venice Beach house in Los Angeles. I didn't know he lived in Venice Beach. And by the way, he's quick here that he doesn't want to blame the poor squirrels. Do you think there's a chance he made this up just to see if anyone would run with it?
I don't know. When I saw this headline, I thought it was parody. I did. I didn't think it was
I
real.
did too. He's just, I feel like he just called up a paper just to see if they would go along with it. And he'd be like, oh, he's bitten right on me knob, just to see if they'd go along with it. No, I was bitten right on me knob. I was feeding the squirrels. I like to feed the squirrels. And then a flea came up, bit me right on the knob. And I was like, Sid, is that you? And he bit me right on the knob. I think he might have just made it up just to fuck with people. I mean, that's something he would do.
It would shock me. He's capable of making some shit like that up. Let's be honest.
Right? Oh, of course. And that's something he would do. He would do that just to mess with people.
Just to mess with people.
But
I agree. Funnier than hell, though. When I saw that this morning, I was like, of course I'm talking to Ron today.
Oh, yeah. I was like, yes, perfect. But yeah, I'm not a big Pistols guy. Just not a big Pistols guy. Never was a big Pistol guy. when you find out he has bad politics, it's like, okay, well, I was never a big Pistols guy. So there you go. And I never got Pill. And I have friends who have tried really hard. I have friends who have just kept sending me. And I'm like, dude, I just don't. People love it. That's fine. I just don't connect with this. Like, I just don't. Like, I like a lot of post-punk music, but the kind of like route they went,
No.
like the sort of, like it was kind of like arty, but not really, and kind of post-industrial, but not really. I just didn't connect with that brand of it. I listened to something like Pill, and I just think the whole time, why am I not listening to the Talking Heads right now? You know, and that's just me. That's just my personal preference.
100%. And what I like so much more about the Dead Kennedys, and I think you're probably on the same page here, is that they are way more cerebral in what they have to say. I mean, their music all has a point, and it's all very, very woke, for lack of a better word. I mean, it's very politically in tune, right?
Well, whenever someone tries to make it out like, and look, I know that not all punk rock, even going back in time, was left wing, and I never claimed it was, but to claim that like, you know, left wing, like being on the left in punk rock didn't have a marriage from the beginning. All you need to say, Wayne Kramer, MC5, end of story.
Oh, 100%.
Like, what more do you need? Is that like MC5, MC freaking 5,
Exactly.
The Clash, the Dead Kennedys, Bad Religion. I mean, so yeah, it's definitely been. I mean, even like in DC, Minor Threat and stuff like that. I mean, they pretty much ran their labels as socialist, more or less. So it's like,
that horrible Sid and Nancy movie.
Was that? Do you remember Courtney Love was in it, right?
Huh?
Was that the one Courtney Love was Nancy?
Oh, there was one with Courtney Love. Yeah.
That's the only one I've seen.
Thinking of?
I don't know. That's the only one I've seen. I feel like there's been more than one thing, so I don't know. But the only one I've ever seen was when Courtney Love was Nancy. I feel like a dog really wants Hypatia's attention, by the way.
I know. Sorry. God, you know, the whole entire movie was just about shooting up heroin. Like, there was no point.
Well, I mean, I guess that was kind of how things went down for him. I mean, Sid Vicious, I mean, it's a really sad story because I think Sid was overall like a talented dude. Although it's tough to know. I mean, the Sex Pistols, they were put together like they were basically a marketing project.
Right.
So, you know, but I think Sid was, I mean, a lot of people, they say like Sid was kind of the heart and soul of the band in many ways. I mean, I like John Lydon's voice. Like, I don't dislike the guy's voice. I think his singing voice is cool. I just didn't care for the music much. But I think he would have gone on to have done some pretty impressive things. I mean, he was only 20 when he died.
Wow.
I think at least. Yeah, I think he was only like 20 years old. And I think Nancy might have been even younger than that. I mean, and when you think about that, I mean, in punk rock years, 20 is like not crazy young. I mean, it's still young, but it's not like, but in punk rock years, you're like, well, he was 20. But now, like, as an actual adult, you're just like, he was 20. And that's like crazy to think. He was only 20 years old. He was barely, I mean, he was a kid.
He was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know.
I'm going to shut the door because she ran out and she's barking. Hang on.
Shut the door. Shut the door. Someone will get bit by the knob. They're barking because they only got a flea bite on the knob. Yeah, that's
live
better.
TV, folks.
So John Lydon, I hope he recovers. That's nice that he's feeding squirrels. I don't know if do they respond to that?
I don't know, but if a flea bites you on your penis, like, I mean, it's just a weird story.
Why was he feeding the squirrels nude? I mean, there's a question. He didn't have to be nude. That could have happened, you know, like they could have like crawled up a pants leg or something. But yeah, it is a strange story. And I have a feeling he might have just made it up just to, I mean, I think he definitely does feed squirrels. He's been doing that for a long time. Like, he wrote about it in his book, which I don't know if they take kindly to that. Like, do squirrels, I mean, I guess according to him, they do, but I don't know. I mean, I've never tried to feed a squirrel, but I did do this once when I was a little kid. I didn't know any better. And here's something I did. A friend of mine, we spent an afternoon, and we were like maybe 5 or 6 years old. We spent an afternoon cracking open acorns and then just putting the insides on the ground. And what we thought we were doing was we were helping the squirrels out. We were like, well, they don't have hands like we do. It's got to be a harder gig for them. We're gonna de-shell these for them. We're helping nature, and that's not something you do. And their parent actually told us. So their parents saw what we did, and they were like, "Why'd you do that?" We were like, "We're helping out the squirrels," and they're like, "No, you're not. They're probably not going to eat this now." They're like, "That's not how it works. You know, squirrels, they do their own thing. They get the acorns their own way." They're like, "How would you like it if the squirrel helped out with your food? Like, how would you like it if like, hey, we're making lunch and a squirrel just jumps in the pot? Like, I'm going to help out. Like, yeah, that might not be too appetizing for you, huh?" And we learned a life lesson that day.
Right.
So I don't know if like squirrels will take out peanuts or something if you set about. I mean, maybe they would. Who knows?
Maybe. I don't know.
I guess we can ask once. You know what? We'll be able to ask John Lydon once his penis recovers, and I wish his penis a safe recovery.
Like, I'm surprised, honestly, that he hasn't posted a photo.
Don't give him ideas. I'm surprised he might have. We don't know. I mean,
it's totally on brand. Let's be honest.
Apparently, so you said I was a liar by getting the bite on me knob, and it. What do you call that? What do you call that big right there? Look at it. Look right at the head.
It's
right
swollen.
at the head. Right at the head. That's not a normal looking penis. That is not a normal looking penis. It's because there's a flea bite right on the knob.
Okay. Ron, we're crazy.
Well wishes. So I got one last question for you. And this is like a fun one for us. And if you want, I will give my answer first if you want some time to think about it. Because obviously I had time to think about this because I knew I wanted to ask you this. So, all right. Who is one philosopher that you think in our contemporary moment, Biden's going to be sitting in the chair soon. Who is the one philosopher you think people really need to take to heart right now, that they really need to keep in mind going forward? Yeah, it's a heavy one, huh?
That is a heavy one.
I thought of it by myself.
Well, it's a heavy one because I sort of like my mind goes to moral philosophy over political philosophy to answer that question. But I think maybe political philosophy would be more helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, you go first.
All right. So I'll go first. So I actually asked those same questions to myself and I leaned on political and, you know, look, I'm all about what folks like Levinas say. I'm all about never letting go of somebody's humanity and doing the best you can while still realizing there are limitations within that. And you can still, I think something people forget is that you can still apply all those philosophies and understand that there are limits. Well, do you think empathy has limits? Do you think empathy and sympathy have limits?
Okay, so I don't.
I'm
a moral naturalist, so I believe that empathy and emphatic thought is really much grounded in our nature. I don't think we have to look further than kin theory, for example, to see that solidarity or helping out your fellow human, there's a reward that's attached to that. I mean, you could argue that maybe that's self-serving in and of itself to think that you're only helping somebody because you gain something from it in return. But I'm not that jaded. I just think I think empathy is the natural state of things. So. Oh,
I don't disagree with that. And maybe I didn't.
A lot of people do though. So.
No, I know a lot of people do, but I don't. But I guess what I was getting at, and maybe I didn't ask the question that great, but what I'm getting at is like, do you think there's a time, like for instance, I guess what I'm really asking would you empathize with an Adolf Hitler? Would you empathize with, that's what I mean when I say there are limits.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I would never empathize with somebody like Hitler, obviously. I'm going to empathize with the victims of Hitler.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. It does. So I guess like to me, that's saying there are limits. And like what this spawned from for me is like, you know, when Donald Trump had COVID, I didn't have any empathy or sympathy for him. I just didn't.
Frankly, neither did I.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. And, you know, I'm not the kind of person that's going to wish ill on anyone, but I'm not going to wish him well either. I have no wishes.
No,
I have
but
no
he's
wishes.
sort of
I don't.
He did all of the things necessary for him to get COVID. Like he denied
Right.
it existed. He didn't wear a mask. It's very difficult to have empathy with somebody that. But okay, so here's the other side of that equation. Let me bring something else into the mix.
Sure.
What about the folks that I think Trump is a part of this class? What about folks that are just psychopaths? They have psychopathy issues where they don't. That their ability to feel empathy doesn't work because they were born with that portion of their brain just simply turned off and not working. I personally think that, like, if you look at the history of psychopathy, the kind of individuals that have this trait are generally drawn into politics,
Right.
and also drawn into corporate managerial positions. I think that trait maybe probably serves them well in those positions because they don't have empathy. They can make these horrible decisions and not feel guilt or care. So, I think that's part of the conversation.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Should we have empathy for a psychopath? Maybe not.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like there are limits and people draw those limits in different places. And some people, they can just draw it as, well, my job is to look out for the company's profit. So I just don't have empathy for anyone that gets in the wake of
the
that.
way of that.
That's
Exactly.
just how it is. And they're
so
just
you and I
void
would
of
say
anything.
That's an immoral position, right? This person
Yes,
is doing
absolutely.
is making an immoral choice, right?
Absolutely.
But for them, their self-serving interests are ingrained in their psychopathy. So they think they're doing something that's on task, right?
They might. I think some of them just don't care. I think in some cases they just, and not even just don't care in the sense that they don't think they're doing anything wrong, not caring in the sense where, well, I know this is wrong, but whatever, this is the world we live in, fuck you. I do think that's definitely a thing. And so, yeah, it's like, well, my empathy, my sympathy, like there are limits. It is ingrained in my nature. It's ingrained in our nature. But, I do have my barriers to where it's like, no, I still recognize this person's humanity, but I look at all the evil shit they've done, and that's a bridge too far for me. I have no, like whatever. And, when I posted basically saying I didn't have empathy for Donald Trump, they're just, well, my empathy is unconditional. My empathy is unconditional. Some people said that back to me, and I was like, okay, well, would you empathize with Hitler? Would you empathize with Adolf Hitler? And, some people said no to that. And when they said no, I was just like, okay, so you do have limits. There are limits. And Hitler is beyond your limit. Mine too. Donald Trump's also above mine and not yours.
I'm with you.
It's like that's all I have to say about it. I don't think it makes me right or wrong or you right or wrong. It's just how we are. Donald Trump's past my limit.
I tend to agree with you.
Joe Biden's past my limit too, by the way.
Yeah, he made the choices that led to that. Why should you feel sorry for him?
Mm-hmm.
He almost welcomed it.
So
who I feel sorry for are who's the kid of the woman in his cabinet that got it? I can't think of her name now. She was on TikTok.
Oh, I know. I forget too, but I know what you're talking about.
Somebody in the audience. I feel sorry for that kid, right? What did she do? What did she do to deserve to get COVID? Nothing. She was just around these really ridiculous adults that couldn't be responsible.
Right. Yeah. Well, so
I have empathy for her.
Right. So getting back to the question where it's like, I'm all about recognizing the humanity while still exercising the limitations that exist. Yeah. But my answer is Proudhon. And the reason Proudhon is the one, he's basically lauded as one of the first anarchist philosophers. He coined property as theft. But if you really read what he was all about and some of the stuff he said, he warned against ever creating a society where we could ever have capital upon capital upon capital. What does that sound like? Sounds like Wall Street. He warned against that. And there were other philosophers that did the same thing, but he was one of the loudest ones warning against ever creating that society. And those are the people that we need to be reading right now. I don't disagree with that. I'm all about, like in all the moral philosophy, I think there's a lot of great lessons you can learn in there. I don't agree with everything from most philosophers, like anything else in the world. But I think right now, you really need to look at how disastrous the system is, how we should have never done most of this, how the experiment has been hijacked many times over, and realize the systemic disease that's going on. And you get that through somebody like a Proudhon. not somebody like a
Yeah, no,
like a
I'm a fan of
Levinas
him
or
as
a
well.
Hegel.
I'm
So
a fan. I'm a
So
fan. I agree.
yeah.
I
Well,
still haven't. I've got
now
like
you
at
have to
least
have
10
one.
people in my head right now.
Well, let's throw one of them out.
Okay. So can I craft my own philosopher? Because if I
Sure.
was going to say there was a combination of two philosophers that if we put the best parts of their philosophy together to create something that a hybrid that I would like, it would be Karl Marx and John Rawls. And I know a lot of people are going to listen to that and think I'm totally batshit crazy, but let me explain myself.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, I think most people are familiar with Karl Marx, right?
I've heard of him.
You've heard of him, right?
He's related to
He's
Groucho.
also very bastardized.
Right.
I was actually I interviewed a guy this week for my podcast. His name is Dr. Asatar Bear. What a great name. And he actually looks like Karl Marx, but he had studied under Richard Wolff at University of Massachusetts. So, and he teaches here locally at Riverside. So I had him on the podcast and it ended up being a 2-hour interview. So I'm going to cut it into 2 segments, but he's a Marxist economist, right? That's what he does. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about that isn't really well discussed is the fact that Karl Marx actually had a belief that the best way to reach a socialist society was to pass through capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might be interesting to consider that going through what we've been through and the fact that we're now at a late stage capitalist moment, maybe this is the ripe opportunity to really test the limits of what he theorized, right? So this is, you know, and there are various viewpoints on this, but mainly what we're looking at is not necessarily, I'm an anarcho. Personally, I'm an anarcho-socialist. I'm a libertarian socialist, which means I don't want a strong state. I want the democracy itself to own the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you and I agree on that. But I also think from a modern philosophical prospect, John Rawls makes some really interesting points about egalitarianism in a society and how hard that is to achieve. I think he is often misclassified from people on the right and also by neoliberals. I don't think a lot of people, in the same way that a lot of people don't understand Adam Smith to its fullest, a lot of people don't have Rawls that way too. I mean, his book is 900 pages long. I had to take
no pictures.
It's a big book. I took 3/4 of John Rawls just to get through that book, just to, you know, that's what a geek I am. But at base, what he's trying to get at is the fact that we're all born into different social starting places, right? So you don't know what you're going to get born into, and you don't, that's just a luck of the draw, right? You have no control over that stuff. So if you really want to have a just society, and when I use the word just, I mean the Greek sense of the word, so it's fairness. If you really want to have a just society, you have to do something about the social starting places, right? So lots of people know about his thought experiment of the veil of ignorance, right? So everybody's behind this veil. You don't know who you're going to be in life, right? You don't know if you're going to be rich or poor, black or white, female or male, intelligent or stupid. You simply don't know.
Well,
so if you
I knew I was born to rock and roll, but that's I'm an exception. But go on.
Born to rock and roll. So point being, if you don't know what you're going to be in life, and you're all there debating about what the laws are going to be, you're logically, just from pure logic, you're going to come up with what he calls the minimum maximum position, which is like the least advantage. The floor of what you're going to accept has to be just enough where everybody accepts it as okay, right? This is the floor.
Right.
So, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So maybe if we applied some of Karl Marx's criticism of capitalism and, you know, his idea of collectivism, if we applied that stuff with this aspect of what John Rawls is getting at as far as different social starting places, I think we'd have a pretty robust philosophy about what our politics should look like.
I agree 100%. No, I feel like your answer is better than mine. Now you cheated, but
I cheated. Oh, because I made up a new guy.
You made 2. No, I'm just kidding. That's an excellent answer. And yeah, because I think it's like, Marx, the critiques, like you're saying, and then Rawls, because like what you would get at, what the conclusion would be is that the floor needs to rise.
Yeah, see, so the thing is Karl Marx is talking about an idealized society in the sense that this is what we would all benefit from these policies, right? And his criticism of capitalism is really on par. Even if you don't like where Karl Marx is going with his conclusions, you have to give him credit for his criticisms because they're all true. And they're all coming true in real time. It's very interesting that we live in a space where we're seeing that happen, right? So, but he doesn't really address the moral aspects. And I think even though John Rawls is really isn't considered a moral philosopher, a lot of what he talks about is really steeped in moral philosophy. Does that make sense?
No, that totally does. No, that totally does. I mean, I've not read a lot of him. I've read more Marx than Rawls, but yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think that's an excellent answer for our contemporary moment, because the floor is out of whack and capitalism is a disaster.
Right.
And it always will be, because he was writing a long time ago. It did the same shit then.
Oh, 100%. I mean, John Rawls is definitely more contemporary, obviously. But if I could, like, for example, so when you get into the end of Rawls' positions, when he does talk about economics, he's more interested in creating what he calls equality of opportunity. It's more of a utilitarian argument. But if you replaced that bit with the anarcho-socialism, like, that to me would be ideal. That's my ideal thought process of what I would like to see.
I think me too. Yeah, I think we're pretty on the same page there. My thing with the state, like, I think the only thing where it's like I'm not a straight up mutualist is because I do think there needs to be, I think in a perfect society, or as close to perfect as we're going to get. I mean, obviously there's no such thing, but I think you would have the state to just kind of oversee make sure the municipalities are doing what they're supposed to, and no one gets left out. I think that would be the state's role, to make sure that there's never a situation. I mean, I'm all about, in my ideal society, we would pretty much have a worker-owned cooperative,
100%.
Like publicly funded market socialist society. And then within that, the role of the state would be to make sure that there was never a scenario where Beverly Hills had everything and everywhere else in Los Angeles had nothing, just as a for instance. That would be the state's role, to make sure something like that didn't happen.
Ron, let's read some of the comments, and because
we're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. Lana, what's up? We'll start at the top. Lana Dell hates the clock. I'm not a big fan of clocks either. I'm with you. I don't know. I think time's some bullshit. Is that what that's a reference to? Hates the clock? Do you know what?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I don't know. I was just reading their name.
Dylan is making a really good point here, though. Equality of opportunity is written on the neoliberal banner. Heath, I don't disagree with you. I think it is a problem. Because equality of opportunity doesn't really get at fixing the actual unequal starting places, right? Right. It's just saying I'm going to give you access to. It's sort of like the Medicare for all plans that aren't really Medicare for all. It's just access to more medical care through health insurance. It's sort of that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely what it is. Yeah, and it's also the dead American dream. You know, like, oh yeah, you have a chance to do, like, yeah, okay. Lana Dell hates the clock. I too am not a fan of time. Nancy has been renominated. They haven't voted her in as speaker yet. Yeah, I mean, she's unopposed. I hear you. Dan, what's up, buddy? Obama's administration was a comedy series, unless you're one of the 99%. Yeah, I feel you. It wasn't, certainly wasn't a comedy series for all the people who received drones, but I know what you mean. Leopard, what's up? On behalf of all Brits, I apologize for this twonk. I don't know if they mean John Lydon or if they mean my really bad British accent. But I'm telling you, if that's directed at me, it's all in good fun. And by the way, I freaking love England. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and I cannot wait until touring happens again, because I can't wait to tour over there. So I cannot wait to see y'all. Everything Revolution, what's up, buddy? 81 to 85, my Florida band Sector 4 was the most anti-Orwellian band on the planet. We have many pastime shows with these bands you mentioned. Let's talk soon. That's awesome. I'm assuming by anti-Orwellian, you mean like anti, like an Orwellian state, not anti like the dude's work. I'm assuming that's what you mean. But yeah, please email me. I'd love to talk to you. Email me and reference this comment. And thank you for reaching out. I think we've met before. I'm pretty sure. We met in Gainesville. I'm pretty certain. But yeah, email me. Let's get something together. Dan, what's up, buddy? Thank you again. If empathy has limits, we should not be deciding them. Okay. Many conscious decisions to withhold empathy will be based on prejudice. That's fair, but I mean, we're also limited by our own capacities, and I would say we don't really get to decide them, at least not consciously. We just know when it is and when it isn't. And so I know it's like, yeah, I don't have empathy for Donald Trump. I don't have empathy for these situations, whatever they may be. I don't have empathy for this person. I don't have empathy for Jeff Epstein. I don't have empathy for Ghislaine Maxwell. I have empathy for the victims. I don't have empathy for them. I don't have empathy for, what are some other for instances? You get it. You get the idea. I don't think we necessarily get to choose that. It just is or isn't where we find ourselves. What do you think,
I think
Tina?
that's fair.
We're getting into a rabbit hole now.
I know, but
not in a bad way. This is the kind of stuff we love, and
Yeah.
I just hope other people.
I think they do.
I get so nervous. I'm so self-conscious whenever I get into the philosophical geek mode. I'm so scared that everybody around me hates me, and everybody hates the show.
I think the opposite is true. I think philosophy is important. Of course, I'm biased.
We both are.
Another comment. His name is pronounced Bader? I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Bader Ginsburg, I think, is the person.
Bader.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know.
He's making a point about, which I think is interesting. He's saying that our current system is anarcho-capitalism. I don't know that it is. I get your point, but give me a second to flesh something out here. I think this is an important point. So anarcho is basically non-status, right? That's
right.
The definition we're using when we say anarcho, non-status. I think what we have is more like what Adam Smith would refer to as state-sponsored monopolies, right? Because of the regulatory capture, because of the revolving door of lobbyists in our regulatory spots. They come from the corporations. They go into the regulatory spots where they make the rules. So now they're self-governing the regulations that are supposed to protect consumers from the corporations. It's all very insular at this point. So the government is more or less sponsoring the capitalism
right
via this route at this point, in my opinion.
So I think with
it's very
that
dangerous. I think it's worse than, I think anarcho-capitalism would be a benefit in a way to what we have now, because at least you would have separate regulatory separate regulatory bodies, couldn't get that out apparently, that would be over watching the system. And we no longer have that because of where we're at with lobbyists coming in and out. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense. But I would say to the commenter, I think they're not wrong. I just think we have anarcho-capitalism for the elite. That's what the elite get. And they get to control it all. The rest of us, that's not the case. What you're saying is that would actually be an improvement to what we have now, because we have corporations that just run the government more or less, which is what's happening.
More or less. Or they're creating the regulations that are supposed to keep them separate. It's anarcho-capitalism
for them. Right. It's anarcho-capitalism for them. They get to make the rules they want to make. They get to do what they want to do. The state cannot touch them. So it's anarcho-capitalism for them. Jeff Bezos lives in an anarcho-capitalist state because of the power he has.
Jeff Bezos is part of the plutonymy. Jeff Bezos is part of the construction of what we're living in, right? Those guys all rigged the system to their benefit, undoubtedly.
Exactly. So they do not answer to any state.
It's socialism for the rich. I agree with that.
Right. So I think that's what the commenter's getting at, in which case they're right. But for the rest of us, it's definitely not that way. For the rest of us, well, we have to do what they tell us to do to benefit the people who are really calling the shots.
Yeah, I think it would be at least an improvement if the Department of Justice actually enforced the antitrust laws that we already have on the books. They choose not to at this point and haven't for decades.
Well, and here, Richard brings up something really excellent here, which is something that, we mentioned on this show too. Didn't that used to be called fascism? Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's dictionary definition fascism. And that's exactly what's going on here. That's exactly what's going on. I mean, I tweeted this out the other day, and I think I worded it poorly. So I think a lot of people didn't really know what I was getting at, which is fine. I mean, that's one of the challenges of Twitter. But I said, like, if you think about how fringe the United States is as far as how we're governed, as far as how this country operates.
Yeah.
If we ever flipped it, where it was like the United States is going to be as far left as it's far right now, if we just flipped it, it would be a bizarre authoritarian state where it would be like the type, like some of those leftists that don't have sex.
Yeah.
You know, it would be that. It would be that. Like that's the equivalent. So it just shows you like it's like we're not even like we are totally out of the ballpark completely. Like that's why like sometimes, you know, and I know like I get emails from people all across the political spectrum, and I try to be particular when I say conservatives, when I say, you know, I try to be particular to say I'm referring to the contemporary GOP, because I know there's classical conservatives out there where even though we have a lot of disagreements, when they're like, dude, this is not us. This our society, this is not what we have in mind, just so you know. Like, and it's like, yeah, I get it. We still have disagreements.
Right.
But this is not what y'all have in mind. I get that. I get that this, just like the authoritarian anti-sex bizarre dystopia is not what I have in mind or what you have in mind. That is not the leftism that we're about, not even close. So yeah, it's what a time. Tina, where can people learn more about you?
Oh, okay. So also I want to like get the audience in on this with me. Ron and I have been sort of discussing about doing political philosophy or any kind of philosophy, really, like maybe once or twice a month. Like
we have
pressure him to do that because I want to do this. I think it would be a really interesting thing to do. So anyway, but my podcast is District 34. And then also I have a channel on Rockfin. So if you want the actual video of the podcast, that's where that is exclusively is on Rockfin. And then District 34 is where I put stuff on YouTube that I don't do for Status Coup because I also work for Status Coup. So those are the best places to find me.
Awesome.
Or on Twitter.
And yes, I'm all about it. I need to get over my own neuroses that everyone, like, I feel like I'm like, oh my God, am I in grad school again? And are people?
Yeah, but it's kind of fun. Look, I mean, I don't know. I think people don't need to necessarily understand theory to know how they feel about the world, how the world is affecting them, how government's affecting them, how bad policy is affecting them. All of those things are valid. But I also think it's helpful to put some context to that, right? I mean, there are people that have been discussing these issues for, centuries, and
a couple folks in the chat are saying it's a good idea. So we got at least we got a handful of people that are on board. So that's enough for me to be like, all right, let's do it.
Keep bugging Ron when I'm not around.
All right, let's do it. We're doing it. Hey, there's a new year coming up soon. New year, new that's how it goes.
New year. Let's do it. Let's definitely do it though. I think I would enjoy it at least.
I mean, I know I would. Well, every time we've done it, I've enjoyed it. I mean, every time we've done, like, present time included. Like, I made that question specifically for you. We've done the Adam Smith segments before, and we've had tons of conversations off mic. So it's like, so I always enjoy it. So yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. We're doing it, folks. Check out Tina. Check out 34th District. Follow her on Twitter. You know the drill. We'll be back tomorrow with a digital rights episode. We're going to be covering all the things going on in the digital rights sphere. There are so many topics to cover. So to help me on this journey, we're going to have Evan Greer. I'm a big fan of hers. She is the deputy director for Fight for the Future. You guys know I've collaborated with them before on a couple campaigns, one for net neutrality, one to ban facial recognitions. Both did pretty well, by the way. I'm proud of how both those campaigns have turned out and are still, we're kind of still in the sphere going forward. But she's going to be on the show. We're going to break down what's going on. She's also a great musician. For those of you who listened to my punk rock special, her track Emma Goldman Would Have Beat Your Ass was on that special. So this is going to be a fun episode tomorrow. It's going to be it's a great song. I'll send it to you if you haven't heard it. But she's going to be on the show tomorrow. In the meantime,
I'm definitely tuning in for this.
it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Lucy says meow. She's over there. I'm pointing to her. She's on the couch. You can't even. She's there. She says meow. Tina's dog says woof.
Woof.
And I say peace. And Tina says peace too, I'm pretty sure.
Peace.
Yeah. Peace, y'all.